Champions, you're a champion already. This is a very short video on how you manage transactions involving two databases within the Spring Boot application. So this is a very common question, and the interviewer will ask you if you have used more than one database in your Spring Boot application. So if you say yes, then they will definitely ask you, how did you configure the two databases in a Spring Boot application? How did the Spring Boot application know that this database 1 has to be used at this time and 2 has to be used at this time? How this is distinguished and how it is configured? So make this data handy with you. Take a screenshot and make this data handy with you so that you can check out before your interview. So the first one is configure multiple data source beans. The second one is multiple transaction manager beans, and then use @transactional to specify the transaction manager. So the first one is multiple data source beans. So here in the database configuration file, you can give a data source 1 and data source 2 as two different beans, and one can be configured as @primary, and in the first one, data source 1, you will be giving the JDBC URL for the first database, and then the second one. So you now have two data sources, data source 1 and data source 2, in the configuration class of data source config. Then the second point is to define the multiple transaction manager beans for this data sources which we have created. So again, in the configuration class for transaction manager config, you can give transaction manager 1, which is returning the data source transaction manager for data source 1, and then another bean for transaction manager 2, which is returning the data source 2. So here you have the configuration class and data source for transaction manager config. Then you have two beans. One is primary, same as that is in the data source bean, and then you will define two transaction managers, one for data source 1 and 2 for data source 2. So now you have data source beans and transaction manager beans, and now you can use @transactional annotation to specify which transaction manager should be used for each method. So here in your service class, you have the two repositories, auto-wired and @transactional. Transaction manager is equal to transaction manager 1, and you can update the database 1, where you can call the database 1 and do whatever query you want to here, and then the transactional, and then you can call the transaction manager 1, 2, which will be internally be calling database 2, and it will be interacting with the database 2. So in this way, you can have multiple databases within the same Spring Boot application. This is a very common question, and if you say yes, you can use it. You should definitely know how to achieve this. Thank you.